And tonight, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is talking about the lessons learned, the ongoing election rumor mill, and how to restore faith in the vote-by-mail system. He also was joined by two other election officials from other states to talk about restoring trust in American elections. 11 Alive's Hope Ford joins us live now with what Raffensperger had to say tonight. Hope?
Well, Raffensperger said addressing the daily rumor whack-a-mole, as he described it, was exhausting but necessary. And at the end of the day, he attributed the loss of 2 Republican Senate seats in Georgia to misinformation, rumors, and rhetoric from the president. Raffensperger said comments from President Trump created distrust in the election system and vote-by-mail systems in Georgia. As a result, far less Republicans trusted sending in an absentee ballot or voting at all. He reminded the vote-by-mail system was ramped up in Georgia solely because it was a necessity because of COVID. I want you to listen to Raffensperger recounting the moment he said things took a turn from rumors to dangerous rhetoric.
When President Trump, I guess, put pressure on the 2 U.S. senators, Republicans, to ask for resignation, that night is when the death threats started coming in. I got a few, but then my wife started getting those, and then it just degenerated even further. What happened, I think, what really, brought it to a head is that then we had an election worker in Gwinnett County was threatened. In addition, their family members, and that's when Gabriel Sterling, our implementation manager, went ballistic at a press conference that this needs to end, because someone is going to get killed. And lo and behold, look what happened last week in the Capitol. And so that's really where it can go if you just continue to play with and stir the pot and play with people's emotion.
And that was the only time Raffensperger referenced what happened at the Capitol tonight. He did say there were some bright spots in this election. 40,000 new poll workers are all being educated on the election process in Georgia. And he said he and his staff members at his office, they are working on ways to make sure that accurate information about the elections in Georgia are heard and taken to heart by Georgians.
All right, Hope, I think a lot of us have learned a lot about elections this season. Thank you so much.